I'm going to see him on the third night, August 5th, at MetLife Stadium. Interesting to see how this flows. He's going to start off the tour July 31st at Hershey, Pennsylvania, at Hershey Park Stadium, and they're playing all the way through October 3rd at Hollywood, Florida, at the Hard Rock Live Arena. So that should be interesting. I'm curious to see how that all plays out. Tell you though, Dave, you ready for this? So this Guns N' Roses show was supposed to have the Smashing Pumpkins open up when it initially was supposed to happen in the summer of 2020. However, that's not happening, right? So what's happening? So Wolf is opening, but this has nothing to do with Wolf, but I looked at the tickets because you can tell on Ticketmaster like what sells and what doesn't. Like 40% of the stadium is sold. I mean, it's like gaping holes. Like I don't...
Wow.
I mean,
really? For
yeah,
GNR?
yeah.
That's surprising.
You know why? Because they came through too many times. They're on the same tour from 2016 that they came out on tour. They haven't released any new album. This is the same reunion tour that they have been on for 5 years.
So you think they're milking it a little?
Like, it's like, come on, man. What's going on? So that's a little weird. He did say, I'm really nervous, as always. I'm a very anxious person, but in a funny way, it's similar to how I felt in Van Halen with the first show I played was at an arena in Charlotte, North Carolina. This time it's a stadium at Hershey, Pennsylvania. So it's following in a really funny way, but definitely still terrifying. It's an honor to be there, and I'm going to do my best. So that's Wolf. He's also doing some other dates. He's doing Friday, September 17th at the Target Center at the KXXR 93X Family Reunion. He's also playing Saturday, October 23rd in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Shaky Knees Festival in Central Park there. It's incredible. And now Mark Tremonti with his band Tremonti is filling in for Mammoth WVH at the Louder Than Life show on September 26th because it clashes with a date on the GNR tour. So his friend Mark is going to fill in for him there. Now, he was in Rolling Stone's podcast, they have Music Now, where he talked about Roth. And this was a breath of fresh air because it's a little different from what he's talked about in other interviews and stuff like that. He said that Roth came in December of 2006. He said when he came in, he gave us gifts. He gave us these funny hats. I still have it somewhere. I love it. It's really a funny memory. It felt like, oh shit, here we are. This is awesome. It was really exciting. He said when they asked him what it was like to work with David Lee Roth on a day-to-day basis, he said he's really a character, but he was very supportive. He really welcomed me onto the team. And it was never like, what the hell is this kid doing here kind of thing. He was fully in, and that was a real pleasure. And he said he really welcomed me in. I mean, obviously, he wouldn't have been a part of it had he not been okay with it. But we really gelled, and it was fun. He's a funny guy and always laughing. When they asked him if he learned any tips from David Lee Roth about being a frontman, because now that he's going to kind of front his own band, he said, I'm certainly not trying to emulate him in any way when it comes to being a frontman, but being able to see how he could control a crowd is really a fun thing to see. Regardless if I'm taking any pointers from it or not, he's one of the greatest frontmen in the history of the scene. So he had good things to say about Roth. Nothing bad. What'd you think of that?
Always very complimentary towards his fellow band members or former fellow band members or whatever you want to call it these days. Going back to Guns N' Roses for a second.
Yeah.
About the funniest thing I heard when Wolf was announced as the opening act for Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
Was somebody had said that he hopes Wolf pulls Slash aside and says, Slash, let me show you how to play Ain't Talking About Love. Which is a reference to Slash's horrible rendition at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well, I thought that
is funny, but
bitingly clever.
I think Slash and the whole band, first of all, the band was not in a good way, Velvet Revolver, at that time, number one. They had their own internal problems, number one. Number two, they were annoyed and pissed off and felt used because of the way that whole induction ceremony was handled. So I know Slash can play Ain't Talk About Love. He might have been a little pissed off and started dicking around. There had to be some sort of story behind the scenes. Don't you remember when Roth was supposed to perform with them and then he started making demands? They wouldn't do Jump or something like that, and he was like...
Oh, yeah, because, he wanted to do Jump, and they were like, well, we don't have a keyboard player. And
and he was like,
I'm not coming.
Exactly. So ridiculous. So there's some other one now. Here's an interview with Wolf with Rock Saverge, and they had asked him in terms of 5150 how he felt about that. He said, Dreams is on that album, and it's one of the best songs my father ever wrote. I think the melody is untouchable. And I thought that was interesting. He also said that in the beginning of Ain't Talking About Love, there's a little mistake in it. He said that Eddie hits the B string twice by accident instead of hitting the E or something. But if you listen to the beginning, you can hear it. That's sort of an interesting fact. In terms of Dave and his dad, he said they were kind of like an opposites attract sort of situation, but they all had the same goal, which was making awesome music for sure. In terms of joining the band, he said they put a lot of trust in me, Ed and Al, and he says, I think that shows the legitimacy of it all. If they were comfortable having me involved, they must have been very confident, and I thank them for that, for giving me the opportunity. They had faith in me to pull it off. And they also said that his favorite song for him and his dad to play was Chinatown, off of A Different Kind of Truth. They just loved playing that song live. That was one of their favorites. They played that song like every set list they could. And also he talked about having famous parents, right? Both of his parents are famous, not just Ed, but Valerie as well. He said, it was normal to me. I had nothing to compare it with, so I guess I never really knew what it was like until we were at an airport and there were people asking my dad to sign something or take pictures. And I was like, who the hell are all these people? So that was kind of funny. Another interview he did with Song Facts, he said when it came to A Different Kind of Truth, releasing that album was way more pressure than doing his solo album. He said with the Van Halen album, there was a lot riding on it, just in terms of how long the last album had come out, and just in the band's history, there was a lot more pressure. With this, the creative experience was very freeing, and it was just fun to just follow what I wanted to hear. So, interesting enough, Dave, he wrote Distance years before Eddie passed, which was shocking to me. I didn't know that. I mean, he says he wrote it between 2013 and 2015. That's more than 5 years before Eddie's passing.
I'm not surprised he wrote it before Ed's passing. I guess I'm surprised how long before Ed's passing he wrote it.
I really thought, I mean, in my own mind, just what I assumed, that he had wrote it kind of within the year that he knew Ed was not well.
Yeah,
okay.
Right. Yeah,
so I was thinking
yeah.
So he said that my father had struggled with his health a lot throughout the years. It was a song that I came out during one of the darker times when it was my brain playing a scenario of what it would be like if I didn't have him in my life. But this is what I thought, Dave. Like, how does he play that song for Ed? I mean, Ed was listening to that song. Like, how does that work?
Now it makes sense, especially with the video.
Okay.
That it's a tribute to Ed, right? But, without the video, the song isn't necessarily explicitly a tribute to Ed. You could use it for anybody who's far away or anyone who's not with you anymore.
Totally.
Right?
But
there's a lot you can do.
I know, but it doesn't take that far to draw the line, right? I mean, it's like...
No, I hear you.
Yeah,
but maybe it started out as an idea for something else, and then as time went on, he's like, wow, this is really applicable to my dad more than ever.
Yeah. So now he also talked about the song Don't Back Down. He said the original demo title was called Salt Bath. And he says because it was a joke of him mixing up the word Sabbath, because that song reminded him so much of Sabbath. He said it's a fight song when you want your team to decimate the other team. Like I said, the song Feel is lyrically rooted in his anxiety, where he feels like there's always something wrong and he's just constantly filled with anxiety, which he said his father suffered from, which is why he drank. The song Think It Over is an idea of this nostalgia controlling your life. Now, when they asked him about A Different Kind of Truth, I thought this was interesting. Talking about a breakdown of what songs were old, what songs were new, because there was a lot of confusion with that, right? So he did say Stay Frosty was an idea that Dave brought in that was completely original and not stemming from an older demo. But in terms of structure, I was the one that put it together. it was just a little acoustic ditty, and we were like, well, what could we do with this? We're not sure, and they figured out Stay Frosty from there, so that's interesting. He said there were fresher ideas, like Chinatown and The Trouble with Never, which I was really able to insert my own flair into and do the tapping intro with the capo on Chinatown, but ideas like You and Your Blues, As Is, was a fresher idea. The ideas that were stemming from older ideas were songs like She's the Woman, Beats Workin', Bullet Head, Big River, and stuff like that. In terms of leftovers, they wanted to know how many songs were left over from A Different Kind of Truth. He says there were not. I don't know where this rumor came out that we recorded like 60 songs or something. What's on the album is everything we recorded. I have no idea where that rumor came from. There was one song we almost did that we wrote in the studio, but it fell apart before we had the chance to. He said it was weird that people talk about these like treasure trove of 60 songs. He said that is definitely not the case. And then he says when he looks at the Roth era and the Hagar era, he says it's two sides of the same coin. But I think they should be equally viewed and appreciated. I think Fair Warning in 1984, those albums are really great representations of the Roth era, and I really like For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge and Balance from the Hagar era. And he says that he thinks that Dreams from the Hagar era is one of the best things his father ever wrote, and that for the Roth era, Unchained is pretty fucking awesome. He noted that song as is the best from the Roth era. Which, by the way...
As it should be.
As it should be. He says he loves everything off of Fair Warning, and Hear About It Later is one of his all-time favorite songs. He loved playing all the deep tracks like Dirty Movies, Drop Dead Legs, Light Up the Sky, and he said he loved playing In a Simple Rhyme with the outro ending, Growth. So, God bless this kid. So, that was kind of cool. Now, in the Washington Post interview was a beautiful article written by Jeff Edgers. Very well done. I'm just going to highlight very few things in here, which was interesting that I thought came out of it. This, out of all of them, was incredibly well written. Pat Bertinelli, Valerie's brother, said that the only person who could actually get through Ed's head was Wolf, and he is one of the closest confidants of Wolf Van Halen. He was with them on that tour, which was nice. Now, in terms of dealing with the lyrical content of Wolfie's album, he said that there's a lot of little things in there. He said he's dealt with betrayal in the most millennial sense. He says a high school sweetheart who he dated for years cheated on him, and then after they broke up, kept charging his credit card for her Amazon purchases. He says another former confidant allegedly stole his laptop. He says those breaches of trust, he said, did drive some of his writing on Mammoth WVH, songs like Don't Back Down and You're to Blame. And his girlfriend now, Andrea Alslup, she's a software engineer from Utah. They've been together for 6 years. Talks to his mom and Uncle Al like every day through texting or they call. He says Van Halen's former manager, Irving Azoff, is always available for him for advice, and that he has a trio of people that he calls the Trusted Humans, made up of Matt Bruck, the guy who runs 5150, was Ed's guitar tech, his uncle Pat Bertinelli, and his manager, Tim Tourier. He says there's nothing we can't talk about, Tim said. I talk to these guys the same way I talk to my wife. So they're very close, but he said he does struggle with anxiety and depression for sure. And he said in 1986, when Eddie got clean and wanted to get back on the road, he said we started jamming, and I hadn't seen him that happy in a while, and he was freshly sober. He was like an alien to the world again, and he was trying to figure out who he was. Then he got into a little bit about the Michael Anthony situation. Michael Anthony and Roth were contacted for this article, but declined to comment. And in terms of Anthony, Irving Azoff said, Ed told Michael he needed to make a choice. Either wait for Van Halen or go with Sammy. And he went with Sammy. And then Valerie made a comment. She said, Van Halen does not make a final record without Wolfie. The fans got 3 extra tours out of Van Halen because of Wolf, which is for sure. We've always said that. When they asked Wolf, who does he like better, Sammy or David? He says they both kick ass. The war is dumb. Enjoy whatever you want and don't hate anybody if they don't like what you like. One thing that was interesting in this article, it was determined what happened with Eddie's estate. Eddie left a quarter of his estate to the Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation, which donates instruments to students who need them. Most of the rest went to his son. Interesting wording there. Most of the rest. And he says Van Halen also owns his father's likeness and decision-making rights. Alex controls the Van Halen recordings, but Wolfgang says the two will work together to preserve the band's legacy. But he said he's very close to his Uncle Alex, but his relationship with the others is a little more than cordial. What do you make of that, Dave?